School districts across Oakland County of late have been holding their annual spelling bees, putting competition and a little bit of learning all on the field, proverbial field in this case, as students compete to spell the biggest and the baddest words in the entire dictionary. That baddest being like the coolest words, not bad words. They don't do that. That would be bad. Joining us to talk about that at the county-wide level is Andrea Zellner, who is the learning design consultant at Oakland Schools. Andrea, thanks for being with us today, as Oakland Schools also did its regional spelling bee here for the 5th consecutive year.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on as we talk about this. You recently hosted your Scripps regional spelling bee. Tell us about that competition, how that all comes about at the county-wide level, and ultimately where those that succeed in that competition can go from there.
Right. So all of our spellers came across Oakland County from 71 different schools, both private and public. And those kids already won their local school bee. So it might be their elementary school bee or their middle school bee, and they were their champions. So we were so excited to invite them there to Oakland University, to the Oakland Center. And we all meet in a giant ballroom on Saturday and we had 15 rounds of competition on Saturday. So it was really intense. After the first round, we still had 50 spellers left. So that gives you a sense of how incredible these kids and how brilliant they were. And at the end, we had Aryan Kadir as our champion with the word Macedonian. So, and he is just an incredible kid. He came late from his science Olympiad regionals that he won. And then he joined us at the spelling bee. So we were really proud of him, from Baker Middle School.
And this guy just going around town winning everything last week.
And all he does is win.
Or qualifying in all of these at the very least, doing a great job. This is the 5th time that Oakland Schools has sponsored this at the regional level, and it makes it really a staple for families across Oakland County. But some would think from the outside looking in that, what's so important about this? It's just spelling. How does it benefit the students?
Yeah, so the spelling bee invites us to play around with language. So one of the things that I think is the biggest misconceptions about spelling is that our dictionary, we use the Merriam-Webster unabridged dictionary, so they can study any word from that dictionary. There is a word list of 4,000 words that Scripps puts out from the dictionary. And the reason that this is important is because understanding the roots of our language and the misconceptions around what's in the dictionary become really supportive of students' literacy overall. So in the dictionary, you will see these the word written out and then a parentheses with these funny little marks in them. And that's how we pronounce the word. And what's interesting is that those are descriptive pronunciations. The dictionary gives us the most common pronunciations. And so that is what we use as the pronouncer. So as kids are studying those words, they're becoming more familiar with all of the idiosyncrasies of our language. And then those understandings of those words support them when they go into more complex texts. So the grade levels here, I think, are important as well. In grades 5th through 8, which is where the majority of our spellers are being pulled from, they're really learning to engage with more complex texts and more subject area disciplinary texts. And having that understanding of the language is super supportive for them. So the spelling is, I think, almost the least important part of this, but what's the most important is that they understand the roots of our language in order to make more sense when they get into text.
We're joined on today's program by Andrea Zellner, the learning design consultant at Oakland Schools, on today's program for a bi-weekly Oakland Schools Education Insight. You can always join us on Thursdays at 10:40 for this segment on the Megacast. And as you mentioned, you served as the pronouncer for the spelling bee, and there's always a table of judges that are going through different sort of roles in the spelling bee. So take us through your role and some of the other roles that they fill as well, because not only are the kids preparing for these spelling bees, those that are moderating them are also doing so.
It is a lot more preparation than I realized when they first asked me 5 years ago. They said, "Hey, do you want to do this thing?" And I thought, "Oh, sure. I don't know what I'm getting myself into." So if you've never been to a spelling bee, the way it works is there's a word list that we all are working from, and it's prescribed from Scripps. So we get this word list and we are studying from it. And I actually have my booklet right here so you can see it. And it's like filled with sticky notes and my own handwriting as I go through it. And what happens is that each kid comes to the podium and I say, "This is your word." And then I deliver the word. And as I'm delivering the word, the student can ask for alternative pronunciations. They can ask for the parts of speech. They can ask for the language of origin, the definition, and to use it in a sentence. Then there are 3 judges who are also working from the same word list to double check that I'm not making any mistakes, and also to write down exactly what letters the kids are saying. And there's a lot of strange idiosyncratic rules. I think my word of the day is idiosyncratic today because everything is a little bit goofy here. But what happens is that the kids can start spelling the word, but if you make a mistake, so if you spell the word B and you start BEA and then you realize you made a mistake, you can't go back. So you have to keep going with your words or the letters in the word that you're spelling. As a pronouncer, the second I get my word list, I start practicing, and Scripps provides me with audio files of all the words and their alternative pronunciations. And what's very difficult is that it's a lot of concentration to make your brain pronounce a word in a way that you're not used to saying it. So one of my examples is if you try to say a word like I tend to say mischievous is how my pronunciation of the word mischievous. That is not the standard pronunciation. The standard pronunciation is mischievous. And there are other pronunciations of that same word. And Scripps will withhold regional pronunciations of a word if they feel that it will mess up the speller. So sometimes I'm pronouncing a word in a way that may not sound familiar to the speller because it's just not how our accent does it, especially with these Michigan accents we have. I have to be very precise in how I pronounce. So my family gets quite annoyed with me because every night I'm just going through this list, saying these words over and over and over again so that on the day I can just go by rote. So that's how everything works. And we also have people who have to help the kids get on and off the stage. And when they are out, it's pretty sad. It breaks our heart every time. So we have very kind people who escort the kids off to get their prizes because every speller gets a little gift bag from us.
As you mentioned, your favorite word of the day, idiosyncrasies. I think back to just a few years ago, a whole lot of eighth grade English students at West Hills Middle School would be getting a whole lot of extra credit from Mr. Honeyman, my 8th grade English teacher there, who used to give out extra credit if you saw some of our spelling words in your daily life and were able to prove that you actually saw or experienced them. But of course, he's now retired, so that's not the case. But it just goes to show like how often we do see these things pop up and the different ways that doing vocabulary tests or participating in a spelling bee can be of benefit to kids as they're expanding their vocabulary, and that's able to really help them across the board in their learning experience.
Well, even our winner this year noted that because his winning word was Macedonian, he knew that from Geography Bee, actually. And there are a lot of place names in the bee. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of proper nouns in the bee. And so you sort of just have to know how they're spelled in that case. And so it's interesting the way that the bee is playing with language and supporting kids and learning all kinds of new things, even beyond what we traditionally think of as, oh, I just need to know how to spell this word. It's really more of digging into our language. And for me, I think the most interesting words are the ones that come through other languages into English, because even then, the way that we say them or the way that we use them as they move into English can be very interesting and delightful as well. I think my favorite moment in the bee this year was the word brouhaha, because you can say brouhaha a number of different ways. You can say brouhaha, you can say brouhaha, or brouhaha. And so we were all laughing together in the middle of the spelling bee because it was just so silly to say haha all with all the different emphasis on the different syllables that day.
We're joined on today's program by Andrea Zellner, Learning Design Consultant at Oakland Schools, for our biweekly Oakland Schools Education Insider. And as we talk about these spelling bees, not everyone has to participate in their school spelling bee and ultimately get all the way even to the Oakland Schools spelling bee. But why should families really be encouraging their kids to participate in these spelling bees?
So that's an excellent question. I think for me, the spelling bee is first a celebration of our language, but also a celebration of those kids who may be a little bit more studious and not the sports kids. I don't want to generalize, but I think it's important for us to celebrate all of the brilliance of our kids, no matter how they're showing up, whether it's on the ball field or on the spelling bee stage. And that is truly important to me, that all of our kids feel seen and celebrated. Not to mention the demonstrated gains that kids make in their literacy skills when they have a true understanding of the roots of our language. So I'm talking about those times where we studied the root of circ, and you think of all the words circle, circumvent, and kind of go through the list and understand what that root means for you as a reader and as a writer, and applying that to your daily work. It really does improve comprehension and those types of skills. But it is a labor of love. It takes a lot of intense practice for the students. Our winners routinely thank their parents or their grown-ups in their lives for practicing with them, and their teachers as well. It also takes a dedicated team at the school level to put on a production like this. It takes a real village, and that is time. So we want to recognize and thank all of our volunteers who make these bees happen, because it really is a joyful moment for everyone to celebrate that spelling bee winner and engage in the weirdness of our language and just marvel, how did they even know how to spell it? That's incredible. So
Yeah,
that's
Andrew,
why I think we should do it more.
and we have a few more minutes with you, Andrew, before we'll need to wrap things up for the day. But while we have that time, tell us about the finalists. Ultimately, those kids that were able to get to the pinnacle of this competition and qualify then for the Scripps National Spelling Bee.
Yeah, so now that we have our winners, so this year the final round ended up with three, and then it went down to two, and they were back and forth. And I was just astonished at how amazing they were. So we had Yashvina Gadla was our runner up, and her brother Vikram went a few years ago. He was our winner in the 2020 or the Oakland Spelling Bee, and he went on to Washington D.C. So this family is really intense with the bee, and we love them. It was so wonderful to see the siblings come through to the regional spelling bee. And then, of course, Aryan will be going off to 6 days in Washington, D.C., where he'll participate in the national bee, and they have multiple rounds of written spelling and oral definitions before they even meet the big stage for the final competition that is generally televised on ESPN as another celebration of our spelling bee fever.
We're joined on the program today by Andrea Zellner, who is the Learning Design Consultant at Oakland Schools. On today's program, you can join us every other week for more information on everything going on in Oakland Schools and all the great projects they're working on, including their spelling bee. And for those that may be preparing for next year's spelling bee, or parents or teachers that want to help their students advance through their more localized and then regional competitions like the one through Oakland Schools, what's your advice for them in the future as they prepare for next year's spelling bee?
My advice is to start with those words of champions lists and study, 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 but also really get to know those languages of origin, the sounds they make. French makes certain spellings related to sounds as opposed to English, or Greek and Latin roots are all going to be a little bit different. So really paying attention to those patterns in the words is the real key, because eventually Even if you memorize all 4,000 words on the Words of Champions list, eventually we move off that list and you just have to know how the words work.
We're joined on today's program by Andrea Zellner, learning design consultant at Oakland Schools, who just completed its regional competition for the Scripps National Spelling Bee. Andrea, another minute or so with you before we'll need to wrap things up today. Anything else that you would like us to know that we should know about this year's competition or competitions of this kind in the future with Oakland Schools?
I think just the big thing is to celebrate our winners and just keep encouraging the kids at home to study our language, enjoy it, and play around. Understand that language evolves and changes, and it's just an interesting thing to study. And you never know where it might take you. Maybe all the way to Washington D.C.
Well, we appreciate having you on to tell us about this competition, and of course, a big congratulations to our finalists from Oakland County and from Oakland Schools. Andrea, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.